Hello, everybody. Welcome back. So on to lesson 9 now, can you believe it, of our plants unit. And we have learned so much. So I'd like you to tell me everything that you can remember so far. What have you learned about plants and their life? Pollination, yeah, that's one. How they pollinate. That flowers have male and female reproductive parts. Seed dispersal, there's lots of different ways of seeds dispersing. What they need to live, not all the plants are the same. Some cactus, for example, they don't need as much water as, say, a fern does, or even a lily. And we also learned at the start a little bit about the food chain, didn't we? And what part plants play in that they get their energy from the sun, but then they pass that on to a primary consumer, which is then passed on to a secondary consumer, and even a tertiary consumer after that. We learned that they're not simple, just in lines, are they? They're more like a web. Okay, well, let's have a look at today what we're learning, and hopefully you've got a pencil, paper, and maybe you even managed to get some food dye and some celery, which would be really great if you can. So let's have a look at today then. There we go. Right, so let's start off with a bit of a reminder. So last lesson, obviously, you created a lovely poster or a cartoon sequence of how a seed's life cycle works. Have a quick look at this now. Just remind yourself about the order, because I'm going to take them away now. Okay, off we go. So we have seeds and we have seed germination, but what comes after seed germination? That's right, growth. Okay, so the seed germinates in the soil and then it starts to grow. What comes next? Pollination, yeah. So we've got pollination that comes next. That requires an insect or the wind to help it sometimes. Some, though, are asexual and they can do it themselves. They're exact clones of their own flower, but most plants need to pollinate. Next is seed formation. That seed's starting to be formed inside the flower, ready to disperse. Yeah. And can you remember the different ways that seeds disperse? Animals is one. Are you telling me I can't hear you? Unfortunately, we're at a different time. Water, wind. What else was that? Rolling. Yes. I'm sure there's another one. I can't remember off the top of my head. Oh, fruit. Of course, yeah, fruit. Because fruit, that's how they pass through the animal. Lots of nutrients on its way, and then I'll drop somewhere else ready to grow. Okay, so a bit of a recap quiz now. See if you can answer these questions. What comes first, seed formation or seed germination? Pause the video. Okay, which one did come first? Technically germination, but you may have thought, okay, it's a cycle, so it's a bit of a trick question because seed formation would have to come and then it becomes a seed and then it germinates, but then it goes all back round again. It was a bit of a trick question, naughty question by me there. Name 3 ways seeds are dispersed. We should be good at this because we just recapped it. Go on, pause the video, have a go. Okay, animals, wind, water, fruit, rolling. Brilliant. What are the male reproductive parts of the flower? Pause the video. Okay, well done if you said the filament and the anther, and you added in that the pollen because that is produced by the anther. How is pollen carried between plants? Pause the video. Okay. Well done if you said insects or the wind. And what do, that's a typo, what does the 2 R's? What do the 2 R's in Mrs. Gren stand for? Pause the video, see if you can remind yourself. Well done if you said respiration and reproduction. Both are important to any animal or plant living. Okay, so what we're going to need today, well, we said about the paper and pen, but also I said about celery and some water and food dye if you have it available. Don't worry if not, but it'll be so much more interesting if you do have that available today. Okay, so our key vocabulary today: veins, stem, leaves, xylem, and roots. Quite not simple ones that you would have heard before, apart from that second to last one, xylem. I'm going to learn what those are. And this is what we're all about today. So how does water travel through a plant? Well, it starts off with the roots. Now, before we go any further, make sure you've got a paper, pencil, and you're making notes as I go along this, so that you can remember when we come to next week. I might give you a quiz, or it will help you with your understanding of what our investigation is today. So water gathers in the ground, it absorbs into the ground in the soil, and this is absorbed by the roots, the same way that they get the nutrients as well. So although when you see water and rain falling and it looks lovely on those leaves, it's actually in the soil that they absorb the water. So they get into the roots through the soil. The waters then progress through the plant's vascular system. Now, vascular system is a way of saying how does it get its nutrients around its body. Our vascular system obviously consists of the way our blood runs around the body. That's a circulatory system even. This is how the plant gets its water around its body. So it goes up from the root into the stem, which is that main part of the center of the plant. Now, we have veins in our body, okay? So if you look on your wrist, you can almost the easiest way to see your veins, and that's how your blood is going through. One of the ways your blood's going through the body is along with your arteries. In a plant, these are called the xylem, okay? And this is how the water and the nutrients get passed through into the plant and through the plant's system. The water and the nutrients are then carried to the flower and the leaves, and we know how important the leaves are, and that's going to be even more important tomorrow. Next lesson, when we look at photosynthesis, you'll see just how important those leaves are. But they essentially they release the gases that they don't need. They also take in gases as well. So important for plants are leaves. So a bit of a recap quiz now. See if you can help me. And sorry if my box here is in the way. What is the name of the veins of the plant? Pause the video, answer the question. Okay, did you say xylem? Well done if you did. Where does the plant get its water from? Pause the video. Okay, where does the plant get its water from? Well done if you said the ground, and that gets absorbed by the roots. So if you said roots, it's not quite right. They don't get the water from the roots, but they get it from the ground, the soil. And where is the water eventually transported to? Yeah, it goes to the leaves, which are so important, and the flower. And obviously that flower is so important as well for the reproduction of the plant. So they need those flowers in order to reproduce. Okay, so here's the part I've been looking forward to. What will happen to celery leaves if we put them in food dye? Okay, so I've started up a little bit of an experiment. Okay, I've got here, just move this down here. You can see, brilliant, yeah. Okay, so I've got here some water. Now, I've also got my celery. Now, I didn't ask you to get some celery necessarily that had leaves on it, but if you do have celery that has leaves, then that's even better because it shows up so much better for what we're going to do. Now, at the bottom of my celery, I've just ripped off it from the rest of the plant. Doesn't matter where you rip it, as long as you've got some of that stem. Obviously, we haven't got roots here, but inside the celery, what's so good is you can actually see in the inside of the stem some of those where those xylems are. You'll be able to see them even better once our investigation gets started. So that is going to go inside the jar with the stem inside the water and our leaves poking out. Then, very carefully, because this stuff really stains. If you have got some of this at home, fantastic. If not, don't worry, you can watch what's happening with mine. This is food dye, and I've got red food dye, so it shows up. I'm just going to pour some of that straight into that water. That's quite a lot, really, wasn't it? Now, we'll leave that there. What do you think will happen to the leaves? Pause the video and write down what you think will happen. Okay, so we're going to have a look at that now, at what might happen. And I'm actually going to show you another website for those of you who can't do this yourselves at home with the celery. So just go back into our PowerPoint. And go. Okay. So if you haven't been able to get some celery, which is absolutely fine, because if you're watching this, you're obviously working from home at the moment. What you need to do is go to the website, which I've just shared here. Okay. Copy down that website address. It's actually on the BBC website, BBC Bite Size Science. You go on there, watch the video. It's called Ivy's Plant Shop, and it will show you exactly what happens. Now, if you are doing this investigation yourself, I wouldn't do that. I'd watch and wait yourself, okay? But I'm going to ask you to pause the video now, and actually, all you need to do for this rest of this is get a diary, okay? Get a diary and record what is happening. So I'll pause the video, come back when you notice something's changed in your celery. Okay, you're back. Great. Let's have a look at one that I've got here. Now, this isn't exactly the same one as before. I'll have to be honest. Stop showing it. This isn't exactly the same one. I started a little bit earlier in the day because I've done this before and I know it takes a little bit of time. So don't worry if your celery hasn't started showing yet. You may just need a little bit more time. But if we have a look at what I've got here. Okay, you can see I've got the water and the red food dye. Now, if you look very, very closely, here, you can start seeing the red food dye starting to travel up the stem, and it is passing through the xylem. So it's making its way up the celery as we speak. Now, the part to really pay attention to is the leaves. And I can already start to see some of these leaves are starting to tint slightly red. Now, why do you think those leaves are starting to turn red? Well done if you said it's because the food dye is red and the food dye is in the water. That water is starting to go up through the celery towards the leaves like we talked about. So if you've started this investigation at home yourself, absolutely brilliant. I want you to ask yourself a question now. What if I, and you can finish that question. What if you were to change the length of the celery? Would it happen quicker? What if you were to use a different plant? Maybe you used a plant which has a flower. Would that change the petals, maybe? Would it change the leaves? If some of you who watched that video that I shared, maybe you'll see that happened in the video, that they started changing the color of the petals. Or you could change a different experiment yourself. You can come up with your own question about how water travels. What if you used a plant that had roots still available and wanted to plant it in that way? Would it work? Would it still have the same effect? So go away. Like I said, keep a record of how you do this and try to observe what happens if you change something about our investigation. Okay, so that's almost it for today. Hopefully you're going to really, sorry, I just got a bit distracted there by something on my computer screen. You'll really come up with a good question that you can answer and observe over a bit of period of time. Remember, science takes a bit longer sometimes than some other lessons, because we're learning over time, just as you're being in investigation at the moment, is hopefully really seeing some improvement there. But this might take a little bit of time, so don't worry if you don't get answers straight away. Leave it for a few hours, just sitting there in its glass or jar with the food dye, with the water, and see what happens to that celery. Like I said, if you didn't, don't worry. What you can learn though from this is really that the water carries up through the stem, through the xylems, to the leaves, to the flowers, and that's how the water travels. So I'm just going to show you the last little bit now. There we are. Okay, quick recap then. And if you didn't manage to do the celery investigation yourself, this is what I want you to do now. Draw a picture in your book or on a piece of paper of the plant on the screen. And can you please put in how water travels through that plant? So pause the video now, copy down a plant, and describe how the water travels through the plant. Okay, so hopefully you managed to remember this is how the water travels through the plant. It starts off in the ground and it is absorbed by the roots. The water then progresses through the plant's vascular system, through the stem, and in that stem and in the system there are the veins of the plant called the xylems. And then eventually the water and the nutrients are carried to the leaves and the flowers, which is why your color of your leaves or flowers in your investigation should start changing color with that food dye. Okay, everybody, so that's the end of today's lesson. I hope you enjoyed the investigations. So our last lesson tomorrow, lesson 10, not tomorrow, depending on when you're doing this. So the last lesson will be photosynthesis. For this, you will only need a paper and some pencils. So thank you very much for helping me out today. And, ooh, can't seem to get out. There we go. Thank you very much for joining me again today, and I hope that I will see you again tomorrow.